conversation is going round. People talking about the colors come to town. Fresh as a summer breeze, she'll take you by surprise.
Welcome to another episode of Fresh Waves. We have a terrific show lined up today, but before we get going, we're going to say a special thank you to Reese's Market and Bakery for the fabulous muffins that they provided for us in the studio today. They're at 5758 Main Street in Stouffville. Jason Rumball is our technical producer. Good morning, Jay.
Good morning, Brent. How are you?
Great, thank you. And Ivan Harris. Ivan Harris, thank you for all you do for the show. This morning we're talking with Scott Duncan and Kim Everson about addictions, about Ben, who is Kim's son, and he's been missing since July. Good morning, Kim.
Good morning,
Good
Brenda.
morning, Scott.
Good morning.
Scott is the host of Sharing the Burden, and not only the host on air, but actually Sharing the Burden has become a big part of your life. Can you tell us about Sharing the Burden?
Sure. We started Sharing the Burden about 16 years ago, I guess now, and originally it was a place for people who were troubled, no matter what their problems were, to come and we'd find a solution along the lines of the 12 steps which were formed originally for alcoholics. It was the first positive thing that happened to the world of alcoholism back in the 1930s, and up today this is used for a myriad of things. It's from depression to anxiety to overeating to different kinds of mental illnesses to all the things we know are problems out there, whether it be codependency, dependency on a drug or a behavior or almost anything. So we put it together and changed it a little to accommodate everybody who was hurting, and we went from there. And then I lost a boy, and actually it was 2012, May of 2012, and it was to a fentanyl overdose, and fentanyl has become something that we at Sharing the Burden have decided that they were our enemies. Anybody using it, anybody selling it, and so on, and I didn't want to see anyone else lose their kids. So I decided that day, actually, the day after he died, that I would start meetings immediately in a much more serious fashion, so that we would not only reach people right away, but so we could seriously try to give hope to people who may be going into that area of life, and that's really, we haven't stopped doing that, and we still do it, and we do it every day, and we do it mostly in jails today, where many are very close to death. So that's where we're at. Okay.
And Kim, you lost your son, Ben, in terms of losing it like you would lose one of your shoes. He's just gone. He's just missing. He just vanished.
He's fallen off the face of the earth, really, because we've had no leads whatsoever. He's been missing since July 11th. A lot of leads did come in and a lot of information, but everything has proved up to be false, and it's not him. So
give us a little bit of a description of Ben.
Ben is about 6 feet tall. He is thin. I'd say probably about 150, 160. Brown hair. He was always clean shaven. I don't know what he is now, but he was always clean shaven. He had a very typical look to a lot of people, and when I say that, when I go out searching down the road, I stop many times thinking I see him, and it's not him. When I say typical, he wears his baseball cap backwards. He wears his sunglasses all the time, a sweatshirt. His pants were always hanging off his hip. And he had like a little swagger that a lot of people have. So it's like, but he's always was very good at keeping his hygiene and everything like that. So I still expect him to be clean shaven and stuff, because he was never good at growing a beard. So hopefully hadn't tried that, because he looks silly. So but we are still in the search. We haven't had any leads whatsoever in the last month or so. Just people reaching out to me, trying to help, and through Just recently, somebody that wants to put something on YouTube about him, which we're very grateful that they're working on that right now, and hopefully that will give us more exposure, because it only takes one person, one person to see his picture, one people to say, I think I saw him. And if we get any leads like that, we are on top of it, and right away.
And the Durham Police have recently done an expose about it. They did a media release.
Yeah, last week they did a media release, and it was on the Oshawa radio station, Kicks. I'm not sure the numbers, but anyway, it was on the radio station. A lot of people heard it because I was getting texts from people saying we just heard it. And also it was on the Brock News in the paper, which I thank Brock News very much about that. And they put it that we're still searching for Ben. And we are. Unfortunately, we probably won't get another media release until the 1-year anniversary of his missing. And that is not till July 11th. So we still have 4 months with no media coverage whatsoever.
From that outlet. We'll get you some more media coverage.
So I'm reaching out.
Okay. Well, we know that Ben had problems with addiction.
Yes.
So, Scott, can you tell us a little bit about what happens? I mean, you've got high school kids that are going to do the party thing. That's just the nature of the high school kids, experimenting with things, pushing that boundary as far as they can push it, and hopefully not falling off. Some kids just dabble for a little while, and then life goes on. Yeah. Others, like Ben, it's almost like a vortex that sucks them in and won't let them go. How does that work?
Well, I'll tell you, I think, and this is somewhat personal, although proven in a lot of psychological camps that... or psychiatric camps, I guess I should say, that the predispositioning of so many to become alcoholic, drug addict, not only a drawing compulsive type of makeup, but a purely potentially addicted makeup, which genetically has been proven to be in certain people, in certain families. And if there already exists something in the family, in the blood, then the chances are really big, like 50-50 is used in AA all the time for alcoholism. So, my dad was an alcoholic, my son became an alcoholic, and I didn't have the genetics, yet I used as much as they did when I was young, and I had no problem putting it away. They could not, My son, from the time he had his first drink to the time he died with fentanyl, never felt the same, he took the first drink, and for him that was life-changing, and he didn't tell people that so much, but it did something for him. And unfortunately, when he crossed this imaginary line or this invisible line that we can't see, he could not stop what he was doing. And in reality, that's what happens to the young person. I mean, it's I believe just peer pressure that gets people to try something. The real message has got to go out to the young somehow, like 5, 6, 7, 8, that. Do not start, because you don't know. And if you have anybody anywhere in your family, you've got to not start, because you don't know if you're going to cross that line. And if you do, you very likely in today's world will end up dying of fentanyl, because that's, not very likely, but those who get to extremes, that seems to be where they go. Whereas in the old days, somebody would stick with coke, stick with pot, stick with different kinds of opiates. But today, it seems like everything, you talk about a vortex in reverse, everything kind of builds and people end up on fentanyl. It's actually amazing in the world of drugs how it works. So anyway, that's kind of where we're at in that game, if you want to call it that.
I agree to that. But I really believe he had such an addictive nature about him. And he was always, I'd say, Ben always took it to the next step. And that was more peer pressure than anything. I believe he just wanted to fit in, and he was having trouble fitting in, and he turned to the drugs, and the drugs made him what he thought was cool, and he would be the guinea pig, and he would try the new stuff, and he would, honest to goodness, when we took him into rehab and we took him into counseling, he had to make a list of every drug that he tried, and I was blown away by all the stuff that he had taken, and stuff I never heard of before. I've been educated a lot on the drugs and what they do, and I believe that drugs have hurt him along the road, whereas they've they've attacked his brain. They made him into somebody he's not. He's certainly, when he went missing, we saw him spiral down, and he didn't want any help. And it's pretty hard to help somebody that doesn't want the help.
Exactly.
And we want to find him so that we can get him the help. He needs to get help to get better. If he's out there getting better on his own, oh, please, that would be the best phone call ever. But I need to know that as a mother that he's trying. But it's hard. It's hard with all the counseling and everything like that. And I even went through counseling myself as a parent because I didn't know how to handle a child.
As did you, Scott, as well, didn't you, during the beginnings of your son's...
Yep. That's what started me on the road to making a difference was really the Al-Anon Family Works, which is really for friends and families and associates of alcoholics or people with a drinking problem, which, by the way, I would say I had a drinking problem where my son and dad both had the predispositioning, and they crossed the line and kept going. And, Dad didn't die of it, but for 50 years he was a man without a full mind, maybe, and my son much the same. He had his wonderful times, but boy, oh boy, when he was going, he was another guy, and even frightened me, to be honest.
Oh, I have been frightened me many times.
Yeah. And that's the other danger. A lot of people run from people like that, whereas you've got to have something inside you, whether it's of a spiritual nature or whatever, to know that you can get through those things probably without running, and running is not a good help for the guy in the soup or in the addiction. So, yeah, it's but what to do is and I think you're doing everything you can, and my hat's off to you. And by the way, we're live on audio with Facebook here, so we'll be able to share this with you people, and in that light, you can get it out on social media as wide and big as you are, like right away, and all of us can, and to whomever we can share this and get that to carry on.
Well,
we can hit a lot of people that way. So
wonderful.
So I've been trying to do that here lately on our show too,
yeah,
and I think it's a good idea. And the audio comes out quite well. It's quite nice. So yeah,
it's interesting all these different social media avenues that we can take that seem to connect us now, countrywide, worldwide. And it's a lovely tool when you're faced with a situation like this where someone's missing and you need to find them. Now, Scott, you told me once when we were talking on Fresh Waves just about your show and addictions and all the rest of it, the story of you, per se. We spoke about the fact that you had set your son up with a counselor who was supposed to be a great counselor, and you were really privileged to get him in there, and he didn't show up.
That's right.
Not once, not twice, but 3 times. So you ended up taking the appointment. How did that go for you?
Well, very interesting. I'll answer it the short way by saying I still see him 25 years later. So he was a psychiatrist who did become a friend, but he also became a mentor for me, a mentor capable in all the areas that I'm interested in, whether it be faith, whether it be drugs, whether it be medicine. This fellow is just one of those well-rounded. And I drive to London to see this guy, like often, and we're talking from Stouffville here right now. So, give you an idea, and I go there probably now close to once a month, and we're involved in different things together too. But when I got there, and I'll tell you, folks, I was driving there and I was heaving and almost throwing up on the road because it was probably the 5th time that I had an appointment with this fellow. Very hard to get in to see, and I thought I've got to go make an appearance. I just can't call again. I feel like an idiot, So I went, and somehow along the way I calmed down and put things together, and it became a ritual that I would follow for the next 25 years, where I would really think deeply as to what I was doing, why I was going there, what my points were on the couple-hour drive, and I would stretch it out to about 4, and when I got there I would know what I wanted to discuss, and it was always feelings. It's the same with our kids who do these things. It all starts with emotions, and if there's an emotional sobriety in them, they don't do that stuff. And that's been my message to the world today, is like, seek emotional sobriety, because without it, you're not going to get the other sobrieties. So, that's another thing off the topic. But we've learned that, and we've worked on that with the psychiatrist and whoever else is interested. So I learned that Scott had some things to look at too, and we only learned that and I only learned that by following this simple, practical 12-step program that had me doing inventories and finding out the goods and bads and the ins and outs and the reasons why I felt and did certain things in my life, and it brought me to a place where I really understood this animal, like big time from the inside out, and could be of benefit to my boy whenever he reached out and wanted help. And that was the only time that I was of benefit, when he reached out and wanted help. And we knew that. And we got to the point where I would say, Sean, it seems to me you might be using, and he would always tell the truth. And he would say, I am. I said, well, we've got to part ways until you really have in your heart that you want to really, really stop doing this, because otherwise, I get sicker than you do, and the first thing you know, I'm going to be in the psych ward, and you're just going to be out somewhere, and I'm not going to know what you're doing, and so on. So we basically have to part ways as a loving father and son. Son and father, until again you have that desire to be in recovery and put it aside, and then whether you can do it or not, I don't care. I'm there with you. I'll go down to the pits or up to the heavens, but only when your desire is to not do what you're doing. And that held true and strong for our whole relationship forever. So when he wanted a friend, when he wanted to share, when he wanted to ask and reach out, I was the guy, and that's what I wanted to be. So long and short, Scott and Sean had a relationship that few dads and sons will ever have, because of his addiction, because of the depth of his recovery efforts and my recovery efforts to live and survive as a family member of somebody with a problem like this, which you know well, Kim, already. I know you do. I can tell even by looking at you right here. But and that's the nature of this beast, and we need to share like this, and we need to share like this, because we need to know what it's like. Maybe where to go to get some camaraderie from people who may have a semblance or of understanding of what we're going through, and for that reason, we also formed Sharing the Burden for everybody who was hurting. And why do you have to be an alcoholic, a drug addict, an associate, friend, family member of, just to go and get involved in this simple step formula that kind of brought it all together. So anyway, long story, a little shorter or longer than I thought, but there you go.
And Kim, your family has been really affected by this, but they were affected by Ben's behavior before he vanished.
Prior, yes.
Yeah.
Well, Ben became violent, and as a teenager and into his early 20s, and we couldn't live with it. We couldn't live with him anymore. So when I went to counseling and everything, what I really got out of the counseling is how I needed to make my house a happy home. And if that meant separating him from everybody else, we had to do that. Right. And I did it. We had to have him charged a couple times for attacking my husband, attacking his sister. He went to jail for a couple nights because of it and everything. And I was so happy this happened. But when the court said he can be let free, but he cannot live with you, and the judge said we cannot live under the same roof. And I was so pleased that he said that, because then I drove him to a shelter.
It's a tough decision as a parent.
It was an awful decision,
horrible.
But honest to goodness, it was the best decision I ever made. And then we talked a lot. We always talked. Ben and I always talked, even right till the day he went missing. And I mean, excuse me, I mean not just once a day. We're talking like 3-4 times a day. That would be a regular day. When he wanted something from me, the record was 90 times a day.
Oh my goodness.
He'd phone and ask, and usually it ended up I hung up and then hung the phone up and stuff like that, and took the phone off the hook. And but he was continually, when he really wanted, he always thought I would cave, and then I stopped caving, and then the phone calls got less and less. But he went to a shelter, and he got thrown out of the shelters. Every shelter he was in, he got thrown out of. And then he started to see the light a little bit. He started to clean his act up a bit. And he went a long time where he met a nice girl, and everything seemed to be going along fine, and then something triggered it again. And then from there, it was continually got worse and worse and worse and worse. And then got better a little bit, then back to worse again.
The typical roller coaster that you always hear about, where they seem to come around a bit and then zoom for whatever reason, they go right back down. And probably the reason ends up being an emotional reason.
Yes.
So we know just before Ben left that there was a series of events leading up to him leaving. He just didn't wake up one morning and say, out of here.
No, he lost his job, and he lost his home where he was living. He was just renting a room down in Ajax. And he actually got removed from his home in Ajax by the police because he was threatening the landlord. But he basically got thrown out because he never paid his rent. And he would get his paycheck, and it would go towards his drug addiction and not pay his rent. And I bailed him out many a times, and I stopped bailing him out. And he said, I don't know where I'm going to go. And I said, well, you're going to have to live in a shelter till you get your feet back on and stuff. And then he left with his backpack and a suitcase. And that night, he called 911 and the police went and picked him up because he said he was suicidal. He wanted to throw himself off of a bridge. Then they took him into the hospital, which under my understanding, under, I don't know, it's Form 1. They were to keep him in for 72 hours for assessment. And they brought in a psychiatrist or something that night. They didn't feel he was suicidal, so he was out the next morning. And that was on, I'm sorry, I might have the dates wrong. I think it was the 11th he got out. And he then went up to Uxbridge, where he dropped in to see his grandmother. He then started phoning me from her number continually, and I caved in and I gave him money. And I gave him money so that he could get back to Oshawa to get into the shelter, which that's what he told me he was doing. He didn't even have enough for bus fare. And I gave him the money, and they have video surveillance of him going into the bank and taking out the money. And that is the last picture we have of Ben, of him in this bank.
And that was what day?
That was on July 11th, and that the phone calls to me were from my mother's house, his grandmother, and they weren't nice calls because I didn't want him to get his 85-year-old grandmother involved in his problems, and told him he needed to stay away from his grandmother and deal with his issues and stuff. Apparently he walked over afterwards to Walmart, and he went into Walmart and asked the girl to call him a taxi. He was going back to Oshawa, and he was supposed to meet the bus there. That's where it picks up. He went in, and she said that she would. She called the taxi. When the taxi came, he was nowhere to be found. So I don't know whether the bus came and got him, or he found somebody that would give him a ride down there. But he did end up in Ajax. He went on July 12th into the bank there and took out his last $3. We have pictures of him, not video, but just some pictures of him, still shots of him actually taking the money out. And it was only $3. I mean, that's not even enough for a bus fare. And that's it. That was the last time. We put money in his account to see if he would ever use his bank card, just trying to see if he had money. It's still there, and he's actually had some checks go into the bank from the Trillium check that you get once a month for the lower income people. And so there's money sitting in his bank account, which he's never touched, and that was always about the money with Ben. If he could get any money, he would be there, clearing it out, and everything. And there's been
another
nothing.
part of the mystery.
Yes.
Well, we are coming up to the end of the first half of the show. We're going to take a little break now, and when we come back, we'll continue the discussion about Ben, about addictions, and about the missing people in Canada, and of course sharing the burden with Scott Duncan here. You're listening to Fresh Waves. I'm your host, Brenda Masson. We'll be back in just a second. Stay tuned. We're back on Fresh Waves. I'm your host, Brenda Masson. This morning we're speaking with Kim Everson, whose son Ben went missing in July. And we're also speaking with Scott Duncan, who is the host of Sharing the Burden.
Addiction is a family disease, and we who have been around it know that there's no question. And oftentimes the people around him or her who have an addiction are often hurt worse than the addict themselves, emotionally, sometimes physically, mentally. So, yeah, it's important to be attacked as a family disease, and really all members of the family, all members of society, in my opinion, need badly recovery from from the way we live, the way we have to live in this society today. So we're really what's called a life recovery group, and we apply this way of life, Brenda, to everything we do. You know, we live, eat, and breathe it. At least I do, because as you say, that's all I do is stay around people who are searching or hungry. Whether it's for people, for a way of life, or whatever it is, I'm around people who are hungry. And down in the city in Toronto, as I was just telling Kim, we did a taping of a program put on by a person who runs something called Mentor-Mentee, which kind of speaks for itself. And we all need somebody to guide and help us along different avenues, and there's so many avenues out there. So life recovery applies to absolutely everybody, and we've even got, for those who are scriptural or spiritual, we've even got programs that go right to the heart. And in the U.S., they're used in large churches as a integral piece of their, of what they do. And everybody in management or in, from the pulpit down to the person picking up money, will say, has to be involved in some sort of recovery. They've got to be versed in this and understand how to talk to people, because they've realized that often things happen between U.S. and Canada. They pick something up a little while before we do, and they're onto it big. I mean, in their big mega churches. So, not that speaks to everybody. It speaks to a lot of people down there, and I think should be speaking to a lot more people up here. 12 Steps is a phenomenal. There's probably 10 million people today just in drugs and booze on this planet who are sober because of the 12 Steps. And if there's 10 million sober, there's another 90, 100 million people who are a lot better off, and those are the ones that surround those people. And that's just, drugs and booze, let alone everything else, from eating bad habits, from under eating, from mental illnesses, anxiety, depression, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Just gambling, just goes on and on and on. And so there's a lot of stuff going on, and we hear a lot of arguments because it's somewhat spiritual that a lot of people don't want to, if you use the word God or something, in some places everybody runs away, and that's fine, but there's a great need out there, and for those who know that there's something to all that stuff, they know how big and important this is. And as I say, the U.S. has caught on, so can Canada, so let's hope.
Well, they say we're all one step away, just one step away from being homeless. Now, Scott, I think that's one of the interesting thing about the addicts is they're good people.
Yep.
And that's what people forget. They see the TV image of the nasty person who's got a baseball bat and smashing windows to get their money to satisfy their drug habit. And that sort of Hollywood version of an addict doesn't really give you an idea of the person.
It's not just Hollywood. It's life. They do that. They become dependent. It's addiction results in dependency, and I really felt that Ben was so dependent on drugs. He needed the drugs to live.
Yeah.
And because drugs can take over your life, and when you go off of them, they can kill you. They can make your heart stop and everything. And I believe he kept on taking drugs because he felt he needed them to live.
Yeah.
And
true addict.
And they do anything to get drugs. And if they had to steal or break into places, steal money, sell things, pawn shops, whatever, they did whatever they could to keep feeding this
But
problem.
the person underneath that guy who's breaking into some place, and that's what I was getting at. That the person inside is a good person.
Yeah, you've got to find a way. If you want to help these people, you've got to find a way to separate the person from his or her behavior, because the behavior is a result, in my opinion, of a mental illness. The drug triggers it and gets it going, and it doesn't really matter which is the horse and which is the cart. They have to be treated simultaneously. I've not met one person in the jail system who's ever said they didn't have problems of some sort, with even undiagnosed problems with different types of ups and downs, and I can tell the extremity or lack of, by the way they speak, and every one of them admits, most diagnosed, by the way, with something or other, that they have a mental illness, and that and oftentimes it's schizophrenia, and which develops more easily in people who started smoking pot at a young age, by the way, if you haven't heard that. But anyway, for those who love their pot, same applies. It's great if you're not somebody predisposed, and eventually, pot will be a piece of history, and the rest will be history too. So we know what that means in many cases, like my boy there. You get to a place and you're gone. But yeah, definitely the people are the people. They're still perfectly sane and normal when they're not insane and living on drugs, in most cases. And as I say, schizophrenia is something that's very serious. The people I see in jails, usually the schizophrenic people are pretty heavily drugged, because if they're in there, they've done something pretty serious. And they're, how should I say, they're dangerous to themselves and to others, and if they're not taking their meds, and they tend, like all of us, you take a med for a while, it seems to work, so you see how you can do without it, same as booze and all these other things, and if you happen to be an addict, of course, you're not away from it very long. But anyway, these people who need meds to live, whether it be the right meds or the wrong meds, they're also the people that'll try other meds, because there's so many side effects to everything, whether it's a drug you shouldn't be taking or one you need to take, and prescriptions are as bad as the stuff sold on the street today, and half of them are prescriptions being resold. But yeah, you got to separate the people, and you got to see. I see people in there. I was telling Kim before the show that one of the ladies I spoke to, who may even recognize Ben, was in there, and she had pretty near killed somebody with a hammer, and changed the person's face and body and so on. And I don't know about his brain or how he is, but anyway, and yet, before I knew that, and it doesn't matter to me even now that I know it, but this lady she's bubbly, she's friendly, she's one of the ones you want to be around in there, and she has absolutely no recollection of this thing. Like, to her, it doesn't exist, so I mean, as somebody in society, you feel horrible that could have happened, and could it be me? But there's no reality attached to me actually doing that, if you can picture it. So, how can you not treat and care about that person the same as you do anyone else? So judges have a tough job out there, I'll tell you.
Well, it's that old thing with the mental illness. If you have a broken leg, you put a cast on it, and everybody respects the fact that you have an injury that needs to be healed. But you can't cast a brain.
No.
Yeah.
So that's the injury that goes undetected. And people expect you to behave in a certain fashion, and you don't, and they don't understand why.
Yeah.
And it's not, oh, you have an injury, let's be kind.
Yeah.
It's, what the heck is wrong with you?
Yeah.
Can't you do this?
Yeah.
What are you talking about? You can't do this. Stop taking that drug.
Yeah.
You don't want to take the drug? Don't take the drug. What are you, crazy?
Yeah.
Well, there you go.
And you've got to be so gentle with these people, to not set them off. It's and if anyone out there, if you get a chance to take or be around what they call dialectic behavioral therapy, have a look at that, because it's a way to deal with the extreme. It was designed more for borderline personality disorder and families of and so on. And my wife and I took some courses, and what an eye-opener. And bottom line in many cases is, your house is not that important. Let it be destroyed before you decide to go and, try and stop this person. If you need help, get the police. Otherwise, let them go, because,
that's what I always do.
and
I let
that's
them go.
pretty bad, but that's the way you've got to treat those kind of people, and that's why most of them end up institutionalized or in permanent halfway house kind of accommodation, and that usually is riddled with more drugs and things. So It's a tough. I'll tell you out there, folks. We all got to get together on this one because none of us are going to get anywhere alone. That's for
It's
sure.
a societal thing. I think you're right. It's something that if the family, as defined in a book by John Bradshaw, is the people of that nucleus, I think we can expand the family to be the communities that we live in, and the way that we as society view the situation, and just what you said, Scott, to treat these people kindly and to treat them delicately, because they are the delicate flowers. They wouldn't be on the drugs if they weren't the delicate flowers, if they weren't the ones that were so soft and mushy on the inside. Even though
You
they
have to
that.
be kind to people.
You gotta love them. You actually gotta love them.
You gotta be kind. I used to say that I really love you a lot, Ben, but I'm not liking you right now. You know, but with all that talk on how violent he was and everything, I still saw good in him.
Well, you told me that he's everybody's friend.
Yeah,
he's just
he
that
can
kind
be
of guy.
everybody's friend. He can, as you say, you met that lady in jail. She was so bubbly, and he can be bubbly as well. But everything when I'd go and I would watch what he's doing, or I'd hear of what was happening, and I'd go, oh, he's almost at a write-off now, and everything like that. And then something would happen, and I go, there's a son I recognize.
There's a son I know.
And then I'd be, okay, there's still hope, and that's why I used to treat every day as a new day. I'd wake up and I go, this is the day that Ben's gonna get help or realize he needs help. And by noon, that theory was out the door. But every day I got up. And I think that's why he knew that no matter what we said to each other, no matter how angry we got at each other, he could still phone me that next day, because every day I woke up and said, this is the day, and he would start off as maybe being positive about that as well, but then usually it ended up not so positive. And that's why I think he felt he could still talk to me. So not hearing from him for this length of time, and when people say, is this typical? No, never. Never. It's unheard of, actually. So this is why we need to find him. Either he's gotten worse and he has no control over what he's doing, or doesn't remember what he's doing, or he's moved on. But I need to know both ways. I need closure. So
I think a lot of times one of the emotional hardships, if you want to say, I don't know the actual word for it, but or the emotional side effects, is people don't understand how much they're really loved. I don't know whether that's a result of the drugs or whether that's a result of the mental illness or a perception that they just have that they can't seem to shake, but they don't understand how much they are loved. And again, yes, the addiction has an effect on the whole family. So does the disappearance. The disappearance just doesn't affect you, Kim. It affects your entire community. People in the community are talking about Ben. And, people are concerned. And people you don't even know message you on Facebook just to say, I'm here for you, or I just can't believe what you're going through, and empathizing and sympathizing, So it is a global thing. And they've got to know how much they're loved. They are.
Yeah.
Because that's the bottom line.
And they can receive it. Like, I see this in the jail all the time. I mentioned the schizophrenics and the mentally ill who are seriously mentally ill and medicated, even though they're so diverse and see life so differently from each other. You can go in a room, and if you truly go in there and you love all those guys, they know in a heartbeat that you care and you love them.
And you're genuine.
And you know what? Yeah, and they'll give you back love that you can't get anywhere. I don't care anywhere. And people say, well, why do you go to jail? I love going to jail because I have my own special high there. I'm able to love some people who love me back more than I get loved anywhere in this world. So, you may hate a jail, but I love the jails, and I'd rather see the people outside, but I love going to jail. I'm in 4, 5, 6, 7 meetings a week sometimes in jails, and I love it. And because I see the people finding enough hope to withstand and have the courage and discipline to go through recovery, which is one heck of a tough grind, I'll tell you. So, and that's what we need to do. And I understand the other side, because I walked on rice paper for so long. And now that I know that I probably would have had to keep doing that if something hadn't changed somewhere along the road. And, how much of that can a person take too? So I don't know. But it's a disease, folks, and think of that. If your friend with cancer told you they had a, 5 to 10 year span or something, and you knew that the person with another disease called addiction was likely to pull a pin in minutes or days or months, you better treat them accordingly because they're diseased. They're not enemies, very important. Love them, it's the only way you're going to get anywhere.
And that's what you said that many times in the past. But I have to ask both of you, what do you think about this theory of tough luck? You have to be cruel to be kind. You have to let them hit their rock bottom. What do you think of this tough love policy? I've heard it so many times. Oh, just let them be. They need to be on their own and they need to hit the rock bottom.
Well, I think that we need to give them the dignity of falling down and trying to get up on their own. But I've kind of reversed my verdict on tough love for the simple reason that when you involve mental illness, which I see today is always involved pretty much, then the fragility of the whole thing is something unknown to most people. So one person treated with tough love may get tough enough to want to go into recovery, to want to get well, to feel that maybe he or she has what it takes to get well with some help outside, and the other will pull a pin, So you don't know who's capable of doing themselves in, where they are in life, and if not doing themselves in, getting into a situation where someone else will do them in or something, So that fragility is very important now. So the tough love thing, you just got to handle it with kid gloves, and it's a one-by-one deal,
Yeah, I agree. I never did the tough love for a long time, and I was always wanting to go the other way, helpful and help them along. And then I found I was probably enabling by helping them out with all the things and all the lies I fell for. Yeah. And I did decide to wipe my hands clean of them for a while, and I needed to, just for my own mental health myself, to back off and not speak to him. And it was probably for about a whole month I didn't speak to him, didn't answer calls to him. If he called my store, I wasn't there, and everything, even if I was. It devastated him. It devastated him, that, because I was the only one that stood by him, and now that one person wasn't anymore. Mm-hmm. And so
it's almost
whether
like really
I
casting him off
into something, I don't know.
And you can never go down that road. You can never go down that road, because I think no matter what, a mom, for sure, is always making a decision from her heart with the best of intentions. Well, I have to tell you, a friend of mine was downtown, and he came out of a building, and he'd been in a meeting, and he wasn't dressed up, like he's just in jeans and a jacket and stuff, but there was a homeless guy on the ground, asking for money for coffee. And he went into his pocket to get him some money and realized that his wallet was missing. And he said to the guy, "Oh my God, I've lost my wallet. I can't believe this." And it was legit. He said, "I can't even get my car because I don't have my keys, and everything was in the wallet." And he starts freaking out. Well, doesn't this guy reach into his cup and say, here, do you need this?
Wow.
And gives him money back.
Yeah.
Isn't that something? Who would have thought?
Yeah.
Who would have thought?
Yeah.
Because these are people underneath here.
Oh, yes,
They are.
Definitely.
They're
Definitely,
people,
yeah.
caring, wonderful people in many instances. And sometimes it's the drugs that make you not so so nice to be around.
Yep.
I used to, like, when I went out looking for homeless people, and I'd have blankets in my thing. I went to Giant Tiger, used to have their blankets on for $3, little throws and everything, and I'd load up. And I never gave money to homeless people. I've always gave gift cards, Tim Hortons gift cards. So I'd buy like $10 gift cards, a whole bunch of them, and I'd hand it to them. So at least they're getting a meal or anything, but I didn't believe in handing them money. But, and I'd give them a blanket to keep warm. So, yeah, they do appreciate it. Oh my God, they so much appreciate it, so.
There you go. So, Kim, if you could say something to Ben over the air, what would you want to say?
That we love you, and we need you to call us. We not only just love you, we need to know you're safe, and your children need to know that as well. Your children are missing you. You have no idea. So please reach out to us.
Okay. Scott, Any words of advice for people who may be struggling with addiction within their own families and they're looking for something?
Actually, depending on where you're at, I mean, if you're in trouble, do the 911. If you have to know about stress lines, get a hold of one. If you're looking to find out something about someone else, you can start with us, Sharing the Burden. Scott at sharingtheburden.ca anytime. 2 T's in Scott. Important message, though, that Kim just gave you people out there is that, a mom loving and looking for her son is a powerful piece to see, and especially you ladies out there, you know what I mean. If you have sons, I remember well my wife at the time when we lost ours. As hard as it is for me, it seemed so much more terrible to her, and I've seen that over and over now as I've gone through the years. So, have a heart and look and be compassionate with these people, because they're real people with diseases, and treat them like you would your best friend with cancer, and we'll change things around in this world. Other than that, I have no idea.
Thank you both for coming on the show today. It's a tough show to do, Kim, but we appreciate you coming and your honesty and just your honesty. It's wonderful. And Scott, thank you so much for everything you do, for helping us out here on Fresh Waves. And of course, people can tune into Sharing the Burden to hear you every week on Tuesday mornings on Sharing the Burden. Yep. Well, this is it for Fresh Waves. I'm your host, Brenda Masson. We've had a really great show again today. And for more information, we'll have links on our Facebook page that will link you to Scott's Facebook page and all the other things that we have going on here in the community.
Nice.
Nice to have you guys in the studio this morning. Thanks a lot.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Today, we're going to try and change the world. Have a great day, everyone.